Welcome everyone. I'm Dorie Hruska with Forever Quilting, and I am so excited to be kicking off our Free-Motion Quilting Challenge, Quilting on the Lines. As you know, I'm obsessed with using stencils as a guide to create fabulous grid designs. But what about quilting on those marked stenciled lines? And to quilt on the lines with a continuous travel path. In this free video series, I'm going to share with you how to use 9 different stencils to mark your fabric, and then how to continuously quilt on those marked lines to create 9 different designs, plus a few bonus variations. If you'd like to quilt along with me, you can use 1.5 yards of solid fabric, or you can download the instructions below for a simple pieced quilt to showcase all of these great designs. You can also find a list below of the stencils and the rulers I'll be using. Are you ready? Let's get started. Most of the stencils I'll be using are basic straight line stencils, but I'm also going to throw in a few stencils with curved lines. If you want to use rulers to stay on these curved lines, then you're going to need a few curved rulers. My favorite set of curved rulers is the original curved ruler set by the Quilted Pineapple. I prefer my rulers to be flat and also have the same curve on the inside as well as the outside. This set seems to fit perfectly for most of the spaces I'm trying to fill. Of course, you will also need a straight line ruler. Now the stencils I'll be using are the 3-inch horizontal square stencil, the 3-inch on-point square stencil, the 3-inch by 6-inch diamond stencil, the 1-inch triangle stencil, the waves, the perspective grid, at an angle, the curvy grid, and then doing the waves. I know that's a lot to remember, not to worry. All of these stencils can be found on my website at forever-quilting.com, or you can take the link below. Before I sandwich my quilt together or load it on the long arm, I prefer to mark my fabric first. Having that hard surface underneath a single layer of fabric helps to make clear markings. I also prefer to use Miracle Chalk Iron Off Pounce Powder for darker fabrics. This comes in the red box. I find that my markings stay on my fabric and do not rub off or bounce off while I'm quilting. When I'm done, I simply iron the marks off. Of course, as with any marking tool, you need to test your fabrics first. My pieced quilt has 9 9-inch blocks. That's why I'm using stencils that are divisible by 3 inches, like the square stencil that's 3 inches, or this diamond stencil that is 3 by 6 inches. But if you're quilting along with me and you're using solid fabric, you can use any of the square or diamond stencil sizes. They come in a 1-inch, 2-inch, or 3-inch grid. I'm going to start by marking the first block with the 3-inch horizontal square stencil. You simply line up your stencil along the outer edge. You can see it coming through the stencil there. Make sure you're centered. You're going to use your pounce powder here and simply swipe over the stencil. You want to make sure you don't let the stencil move underneath your hands. You want to hold on to it really good as you're swiping across. Before you move the stencil, you want to peel it back and make sure that the markings are very clear. And if they're not, then you'll swipe again. Okay, that's it for the first one. That was really easy, wasn't it? For the second block, I'll be using the 3-inch on-point stencil. Now, I'm sure you've seen this style of stencil before, mostly used for marking crosshatch lines behind applique. The problem I always found was that these lines were measured across the straight side of the square instead of across the center. Therefore, they never fit my blocks or sashing or borders. That's why I created the square and the diamond stencils. Both of these stencils are measured across the center, and they come in a 1-inch, 2-inch, or 3-inch square, or the diamonds are 1 inch by 2 inch, 2" by 4" or this one that is 3" by 6". These are the most common sizes that fit the most common blocks, borders, and sashing. So for this square one, we're going to line it up with our points going into the corner. Actually, we're going to offset it. We're going to do the 3 points here along the edge, and then you're going to measure, or not measure, but just eyeball having the squares line up as centered as possible. Once you feel like you've got that lined up good, then go ahead and mark the stencil. Remember to peel it back and make sure that the line's transferred really well. And if not, just swipe over the stencil again. There you go. All right, we'll move on to the diamond one. Now for this one, this is a 3" by 6" diamond, which fits inside of our 9" square. But it's a really large diamond, a really large size to, if we're just quilting on the lines, this is a large space to leave unquilted. So I'm going to show you a trick. First, we want to go ahead and mark the stencil as is, making sure we're lining everything up. Got a little bit more centered for you. And remember, when you're swiping across, you're kind of wanting to go across the lines so that the powder gets caught in the cuts of the stencil. So if you need to, go different directions to make sure you're kind of going across those lines. Peel that back. Didn't get the top edge very well, so I'm going to go ahead and swipe across there again. Hopefully I didn't shift that. I did just a little, but not a problem. Okay, now I'm going to shift the stencil up, lining up these 2 corners here, making sure all my points along the edge line up. And this is going to give me a smaller grid. Since I don't have a stencil that is this small that fits within a 9" block, I can just double up marking this stencil and actually create a grid that is, let's see, that would be 3" by 3" by 1.5 inches, to do my math really quick there. Okay, we'll peel that back. And now we have a smaller grid that fits our space. I love how versatile these different stencils are depending on the space we're trying to fill. All right, our next one is our 1" triangle. And you've probably noticed I've got my stencils marked with my initial on them. That's the way if I go to classes, it's good to mark those with a Sharpie. That way you keep track of which one is yours. So these are just my stencils that I use all the time. Now you'll see here, this is a 1" triangle stencil, but it doesn't quite fit the space. It's a little bit short. So what I'm going to first do is mark, pushing it all the way to the top. Making sure I get it completely centered. Actually, I think I'm going to go down to where this line here goes along the bottom edge. Let's try it that way first. Now I'm going to shift it up. You'll need to find the lines underneath that line up. And also make sure the edge is lined up and the top edge. Just keep flipping it back and forth until you feel like you're just really confident in how you have it lined up. Then we really only need to mark this top edge. Just make sure I have that lined up good. Peel that back. There. Now, did double it up a little bit, but that's not a problem. We're going to use our rulers when we actually quilt this, and so we'll keep that line nice and straight. All right, the next one we're going to do is the perspective grid. Now, this grid is a 12-inch grid, and our block is only 9 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this smaller area here and put that in the corner. And let the rest of it fall where it's going to fall. Okay, so I'm just going to start with this in the corner, line up my 2 edges here, and then mark the stencil. Of course, if you're using solid fabric and you want to do your blocks at 12 inches, it would give you a lot more practice area. You're welcome to mark out this entire grid. The traveling path that I'm going to use is going to be the same no matter what. Okay, the next one we're going to do is add an angle. Now again, this is a 12-inch grid, and our block is only 9 inches. So you can choose to go all the way over to one side, which these lines are 1 inch on this side and 2 inches on this side. So you can either center it or you can push it all the way over to one side. That is just up to you which way you want to do it. Okay, I'm going to kind of center it here too to where I don't have a partial line, and also center it from side to side. Okay, got just 3 more to go. This next one we're going to do is the curvy grid. Same with the other ones, it's bigger, so we're just going to center this. Just kind of watch where your curve lines are falling and try to have them fall where they're pretty much in the center and not little partial curve lines. Of course, if you get a few partial curve lines, you can just choose to quilt those or not quilt those later on, even if the marks are there. Now, another thing with some of these stencils that have a ton of cuts in them, you need to be careful that when you're swiping them, you're not pushing really hard and folding that stencil. So like this is one of those that has a lot of cuts, so you want to go slower and swipe over a smaller area because you're liable to catch one of those cuts and then move the stencil. Okay, so just go slowly. And remember, you're going to cross those cuts in order to get that powder down into the cut area. And that way the design transfers. Again, peel it back. And re-swipe any area that might be a little bit light in color. There we go. All right, next one, the waves. Now in this one, it's kind of long and skinny, so you need to decide where you want that to line up at. I'm going to choose to line it up to where I get 2 of these open areas inside of my 9-inch block. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that they're centered along this outer edge. I've got like an equal distance along the sides. And then also paying attention to the top one and the bottom wave and centering those. Okay. Of course, if your powder's not coming through very well, put your lid back on and then just tap it a little bit. You'll start working that powder down into the sponge again. All right, and now our last one, doing the waves. Same thing with this one. We have just one single wave going across the stencil, and it repeats. If you were to repeat the stencil over a larger area, you'd get the curve going up and the curve going down. So I'm just going to center it to where I've got the curve going right in the center of my block. And then maybe having this bottom one land at the bottom of the block and this top line land along the top edge. Now that I have the fabric marked, I'm ready to layer the backing, the batting, and the top. I'm going to be demoing these designs on both a domestic sit-down machine and a long arm machine so that you can see that these designs can be quilted no matter which machine you use. Are you ready to get started? All the information you need is at the link below. All the stencils I use, the rulers I use, and the pattern for the quilt. That's where you'll also find the next video. I hope you enjoy this mini workshop, Quilting on the Lines.